2020's Crusader Kings 3, or CK3 as it is often called by the fanbase, is the third entry in Paradox Interactive's grand strategy role-playing game series where players assume the role of thousands of historical figures, families, and nations, all in the name of their own goals and ambitions. With the option to play as historical titans like Alfred the Great or William the Conqueror, or massive empires like the Byzantines or the Holy Roman Empire, there really is no limit to what you can do besides your own imagination. But eventually those lofty or humble goals are met. The achievement you were eyeing or the titles you craved earned and the journey ends. That excited feeling you got when loading up your map-spanning empire diminished. And no matter how hard you try, those restarts just start to hit a little different, a little less than before, until finally you don't have the energy to load up the game anymore. Now, to their credit, Paradox is very good about continually supporting their games with DLC and frequent patches. Their last update for their 2012 release, Crusader Kings 2, was September 28th, 2021, which is almost 10 years post-launch, so that's pretty impressive. But it doesn't change the fact that sometimes games just need a little splash of something different. There's only so much bug fixes and minor flavor DLC can do to keep players coming back to their favorite map gazer. And yes, CK3 and CK2 do have expansions that are released fairly frequently. It still leaves a lot of time in between for players to get bored and want to explore other avenues. So what avenues are there? Well, total conversion mods. Crusader Kings, in my opinion, has one of the most dedicated and ambitious modding communities out there. And while the third entry in the series has only just begun to show its true potential, I think now is the perfect time for players to jump in and give some of these mods a try. Now before I dive into these, when I say total conversion mods, I mean mods that fundamentally change the map and mechanics of CK3 itself. Not all of them, mind you, but enough to be noticeable. There are also hundreds of sub-mods with the purpose of enhancing existing features of the base game, but total conversion mods aim to create a wholly unique experience separate from the base game, and therefore this list will focus on those sort of mods. Now, these can be historically based, which puts you in the shoes of late Roman legionaries or amongst the Hellenistic kingdoms following the death of Alexander the Great, or these mods can be fantastical and put you in the role of a powerful necromancer, a vampire, or even a demigod. There's truly something here for everyone, which is why today, I, Sol, your narrator, present you this list of 6 conversion mods that I believe every Crusader Kings 3 player, new or old, should give a try. I'm going to try and evenly divide these between fantastical and historical in order to keep them organized. Probably goes without saying, but I'm only recommending mods I have personally tried. There are quite a few mods I had to leave off the list as well for the sake of keeping the divide between historical and fantastical even. This was mostly my own fault, as I usually play the fantasy mods over the historical mods, so if there are any historical ones that I left out that you recommend, feel free to mention them in the comments. No disrespect to any of the authors or developers of any mod I left out. If it's fantasy or historical, chances are I've played it or I've wanted to play it, and I feel bad about excluding it. But anyway, without further ado, let's begin with historical mods. Our first entry on this list is The Fallen Eagle Beyond the Vistula and the Indus, which aims to bring the early medieval era, 361 to 867 AD, to Crusader Kings 3. CK3, for those curious, currently sports middle and late medieval start dates, by default. Fallen Eagle currently has bookmarks for the years 361, 395, and 476 AD, but aims to add 532, 632, and 768 AD as they progress. The goal of this mod is to present the tumultuous period leading up to and following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD, and gives players a sandbox to shape the future of Europe, Asia, and Africa as they see fit. I think a mod which lets you play as hugely important figures like King Alaric I of the Visigoths, who was a once Roman ally who was refused a place of higher power in the empire and ultimately sacked Rome in 410 AD, or Emperor Romulus Augustulus, the last Western Roman emperor who ruled for less than a single year. Both of these are incredibly cool options, but there's a ton. And I'm a huge fan of Roman history, especially the period following the Western Roman Empire's collapse, where petty kings and kingdoms seemingly rose and fell almost overnight, and being able to potentially prevent the collapse of the Western Roman Empire and hold together during a time of intense civil war and strife is incredibly appealing to me as a player. The assets and maps are all beautifully done, and a lot of heart and attention to detail has been put into this, and really all the mods on this list, to give it a feeling wholly unique from the base game. So yeah, I really recommend this first one. The Fallen Eagle is quite good, and I really do like the font on this map. It's quite appealing, if you ask me. Our second mod is Apotheosis, the Hellenistic Age, which takes us way back to the year 275 BC. Alexander the Great's empire has faded dramatically following his death and refusal to name an heir, his lands splintering between his generals into new kingdoms who each vie for power and glory here in the Mediterranean. This is the Hellenistic period, spanning roughly from 323 BC, or the death of Alexander the Great, to the conquest of Greece by Rome in 30 BC. While this mod may have one of the smallest overhaul map areas on this list, it makes up for it in sheer potential. Famed city-states like Sparta and Athens have entered their twilight and are historically doomed to fade and to be forgotten, while the cities of Rhodes and their Colossus and the power of King Ptolemy I and his dynasty have yet to reach their apex. But none of these things have to be this way. There are many historical decisions players are given as goals, such as restoring the Peloponnesian or Athenian leagues, and the power to bring these places back from the brink or push them over the edge is at your fingertips. While a major player in this period, Egypt, has not yet been added as of August 2023, there's still plenty of fun to be had with the various cultures and historical figures that are present now. I really have enjoyed my time with this one, and I can't wait to see when it's fully complete, and I do plan to do a series on this very, very soon, so keep an eye out for that, please. Please watch it. Our third mod is Shogunate, and it was a mod that I tried a long time ago, and I've played probably the least of these historical mods, but I think it's really, really well done. In the 16th century, Japan was aflame with war. When the great Nobunaga and his successor Tokugawa ended the Ashikaga shogunate and united Japan under a single power, they brought forth the Azuchi Momoyama period, which then led to the Tokugawa shogunate, or Japan's feudal period, where the nation existed for nearly 300 years in relative isolation from the rest of the world, but also experienced massive urban and economic growth. This preceding war for unification is the mod's central focus, but it isn't all this mod offers, as you are given access to several bookmarks and nearly 400 years of Japanese history and conflict to participate in. While this is admittedly enough reason for me personally to play it, I actually enjoy this mod because of its masterful use of CK3's struggle mechanic, which allows for multi-stage, multi-conflict in-game struggles to achieve certain objectives. The feature was added to the game with the Fate of Iberia, where players were given the opportunity to take control of the Reconquista, which historically spanned for several hundred years. Although some criticize this feature for needing some fine-tuning, which I agree, I've always enjoyed the dynamic storytelling the feature affords. But in this mod, the developers have given players full control of the unification or the dissolution of Japan's future shogunate. A lot of people love this period in Japanese history for one reason or another. I love the feudal period due to the films of directors like Akira Kurosawa or Masaki Kobayashi, so it's interesting to me to learn a little and participate in some of the conflicts that inspired those great directors. Overall, this is a really fantastic mod, and anybody who loves Japanese history or those who simply want to mess around with a unique and interesting period will have a great time. Next, we're going to move on to our 3 fantastic mods, and you've seen all 3 of these featured pretty prominently on this channel, but for those of you unfamiliar, let's jump right in. Our first mod is Elder Kings 2. Now, The Elder Scrolls is not a series that needs introduction for most gamers. Skyrim, for example, is a name that has been synonymous with the genre of RPGs for over a decade now, and until Bethesda finally decides we deserve a 6th game, will remain as such. Please give me Elder Scrolls 6, please. But games like Morrowind and Oblivion were games that I personally cut my teeth on, so naturally it goes without saying that this is one of my favorite game series and one of my favorite mods for this game. It's no wonder, therefore, that I begin this next session with a mod that puts players firmly in the world of Tamriel during its second era, which includes a bookmark just before and during the mysterious period of struggle and strife known as the Interregnum, where the Empire of Old fell and gave way to their eventual successors, whose descendants formed the provinces as we recognize them today. Players can play as a variety of characters who exist in the game as we know it now, such as the historical villain Manimarco, or familiar faces like Davith Fear, or make their own story and assume control of custom rulers in a land all their own. Want to be a sea elf or a Daedric pirate king? You can do that. Want to be a fox person that worships trees or a blood-sucking vampire? Well, yeah, you can do that too. How about just an orc who wants to claim an empire for his own people? Well, you guessed it, it's all doable. This is, in my opinion, one of the most well-fleshed out mods for the game as of right now, regardless of genre. The sheer amount of attention to detail, be it the lore, items, or even just the physical characteristics of the races themselves, is truly inspiring. There is genuinely an almost unlimited sense of potential for new players as you take on your respective group and steer them to a future of your own design. A little caveat though for people who want to try this mod, at the time of this video, which is August 2023 again if you didn't pay attention earlier, the mod hasn't been updated for the newest game version, so you will need to roll your game back to 1.8.2 or it will crash to desktop when you try to launch it. Just an FYI. Our next mod is A Game of Thrones, or AGOT as it is often called by the community. Listen, I know that the show didn't turn out the way we all wanted, and the books probably aren't ever going to be finished, but that doesn't change the fact that anything related to George R.R. Martin's works is going to sell like gangbusters. And you don't even have to buy this, it's free. I mean, look at Elden Ring. I love FromSoft. Everything they make is pretty much fantastic. But you can't tell me some of the success of that game wasn't because of our boy George. AGOT has been around for a while. They and their team have existed since Crusader Kings 2 as basically its flagship total conversion mod and being popular enough to have its own subreddit. But AGOT is, as far as I've seen, the biggest sub-community in the Crusader Kings modding community, so of course I recommend it, but with the big caveat that this mod, at least for Crusader Kings 3, is still in beta. Only the 282 and 284 start dates exist as of right now, which is just Robert's Rebellion and right after, so a lot of features are still to come. There are no dragons, there is no War of the Five Kings or Blackfire Rebellion, and in many respects the game as it exists right now is more a proof of concept than a fully fleshed out idea. It will likely be some years yet before we see it at its fullest potential, but what we have right now is truly something special. The team behind it is dedicated and timely in their updates, and they respond to the community and their questions quite frequently, so you're never in the dark about what's going on. My favorite parts are probably the unique assets, which take huge inspiration from lore art in the show to create a beautifully done blend. Plus it has some of the best mechanics like knighthood and adoption, or its use of the struggle mechanic beyond the wall, built in by default. It also has some of the most dedicated and the best sub mods out of any mod I've personally tried. Really all you need to do is look at my channel, see how much content I put out for it, and know how much I love it. I would gush over this all day if I had the chance, but I want to be fair to all the other mods. Bottom line, even if you don't like a Game of Thrones, it works incredibly well as a fantasy medieval sandbox, and once it reaches the same level of polish as its Crusader Kings 2 predecessor, it'll probably be the best version of a Game of Thrones game we are likely to ever get. This last mod was a tough pick because I wanted to talk about a lot of mods, like Warcraft Guardians of Azeroth 2, or like God Herja, The Dying World. Those are both great mods, but I had to give it to my favorite IP, one of my favorite IPs of all time, and a mod that has some of the best assets and lore decision screens I've seen in any mod. And that's Lord of the Rings Realms in Exile, which is also one of the longest running total conversion mods for Crusader Kings 3, having been in development now for about 3 years. I think fans of Tolkien's work have desperately wanted games that live up to his legacy, with few, if any, ever having done so. But I'm happy to say that I think this mod, while itself also still in a relative beta status, is easily on its way to achieving this goal. Very seldom have I played anything where I was excited to read the constant lore dumps, many of which are quite well written and thought out, allowing players to change the course of the books and forge a future of your own choosing. I know that's basically the goal of all these mods, so that doesn't sound very unique, but getting an in-game decision not to cut down the forest of Fanghorn as Saruman, or being able to invade Gondor as Sauron, or being able to take over Umbar as the Black Númenóreans is just really, really cool to me. This is another mod which has simply gorgeous custom assets, most of which draw their inspiration from Peter Jackson's film trilogy, while also drawing much from the books themselves for visual and narrative inspiration. I think out of all the mods on this list, this one has the highest potential for me personally. I think once we get access to the lands north of the Misty Mountains and the Dwarves, I will be hard-pressed to play another mod for a long while, but that's a good thing. I think being excited for a mod shows how well it's already done. In the almost 3 years of its existence, Realms in Exile has gone through a ton of changes, but one thing has remained constant. The quality of the presented product and love of the source material rings true in every interaction, decision, and hour spent in-game. I truly cannot recommend this mod enough, or any of the mods that I've talked about. And that is it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this video was useful to you. If you've played all of these mods, feel free to leave some that you recommend for others down below. If you like this video, make sure to like and comment, or just like it if you could, please do. And as always, I'm Soul. This has been another recommendation video, and I will see you in the next one.